I'm Tony Ruiz of Gold Derby here with Pedro and John Shenk, who are the directors of Lead Me Home, a stunning new documentary that can be seen on Netflix about the homeless crisis in America. And gentlemen, either one of you can start with this first question. I'm just curious, how did this topic become kind of like the focus of of the film you wanted to make?
Well, Pedro and I live in San Francisco. Pedro's in LA. We've both been living in these cities for decades now. And as you know, you can't walk a block in LA, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, choose a West Coast city and not be faced with the homelessness crisis that we're
Sacramento,
facing.
Which is where I'm based.
Oh, you're in Sacramento. Yeah, absolutely. We actually, well, then you recognize Darryl Steinberg in the film.
Yes.
The mayor of Sacramento. It was one of these things where we kind of looked at each other one day and we thought, there's an incredible story here that we're just literally walking by every day. And in the film, you see people that, live blocks from each of our homes. And so, Pedro and I both traveled the world far and wide making documentaries in our careers. And this felt like a really challenging, but potentially really meaningful subject to tackle right here at home.
Go ahead, Pedro.
No, I was going to say, it literally was something that we have, we noticed that John and, we had, like right here, like just down the block from me, I have neighbors who live in tents just down the street. And it's something that we were, that's all of, I'm guilty as anyone of ignoring. And I think John and I began talking, and John, he shared this incredible New York Times Magazine op-ed by a writer called Dan Duane that talked who was also a friend of John's and a wonderful writer, and he talked about sort of like breaking that wall, that sort of invisible wall, and actually approaching an encampment and having a conversation, because that's the thing that we've unknowingly, all of us have like built up these walls, and Dan, wrote about so beautifully in that article about kind of, breaking that wall and kind of approaching and, having a conversation, connecting on a human level. And I think that in a way for us, it sparked something really meaningful and, and wanting to sort of, connect on a human level and kind of, really, really kind of branch out and sort of like look at life from a different perspective. And I think that was really sort of like what drove us from the very beginning.
As I was watching the film, the thing that I kept kind of writing down as I was watching it was the word empathy, because we often see the homeless from, you're right, through this kind of wall. And, the film could have easily been just like this kind of like academic look, but it really is an empathetic look at these people and their stories. So how did you guys go about connecting with these individuals and gathering their trust so that you could tell their stories?
It was, and thank you. I think for John and I, John is, I was really lucky to work with John on a film he directed almost 10 years ago, John, oh my God, more than 10 years ago, Island President. And I edited that film, and John is a poet that is so present. He's a poet with a camera. This Leave Me Home is shot by John, and he connects on a really deeply human level and connects on an emotional level. And I think we wanted this film, Lead Me Home, to be an experience, more than an informational, like more of an emotional experience. So to go on a ride and kind of connect on the base, really connecting on going back to basics. So like what makes us human, right? We all wake up, we brush our teeth, we grab coffee, we do laundry. We fall in love, we go to the grocery stores to buy food for our families. That that human experience, we wanted to kind of lay the playing field and just kind of connect with everyone on like a very basic human level. And that was sort of how we approached it. And then we started going to organizations and meeting with organizations in Seattle, San Francisco, and LA. And through these organizations, just started to meet people who were experiencing homelessness and who were willing to open up their lives and to share their daily lives with us and tell us a little bit about their journeys. And one of the things that you see in the film, which is a thematic thing, the interviews that you see there, those are actually the questions that you're hearing there are they're called a vulnerability assessment interview. They're basically they ask people through organizations, through these organizations working in the homelessness space, just to kind of get a feel for the needs of the people that are coming in, of the clients, and in order to expedite some level of housing, but depending on each person's needs. And we were in Seattle, and we went to the largest shelter in Seattle, and they were like, well, you can't really film in the shelter, but we do these vulnerability assessments. And by the way, these interviews are done all over the country. And they said, well, we can film these interviews, and that's how we started. And right, John? And we did that first one, and we were kind of blown away.
Yeah, it was kind of an amazing moment, actually, because Pedro and I have done hundreds, if not thousands, of documentary interviews in our career. And we asked one of these shelters that we were visiting in Seattle, how do you, what's the first point of contact with people? What do you do? And they say, well, we do this vulnerability assessment interview. So we said, okay, well, we'd love to witness one. And we sat down and we witnessed one. And it was like, we realized that they just made us look like amateurs when it comes to interviewing people. They were just it was so simple, the process, but so full of humanity, just kind of asking the basic questions about people's lives. And in the simplest way, emotion just poured out of these people. And you see it in the film, that you ask somebody about their family background and they just immediately start crying because there's so much pain and trauma there. And you see that in the film. Ruiz, for example, you hear the question, do you have any family? And he immediately just kind of takes off his glasses and starts tearing up. And it's all over the film. Pedro was talking about me, and thank you, Pedro. I just feel beyond lucky to have collaborated with Pedro. Pedro's really a heart on a stick. He's all love and emotion, and he's able, with his amazing editing skills and storytelling, to connect these people that we filmed to the audience. It was also kind of a combination of some other interests that Pedro and I had, which is we've always kind of been interested in experiential movies, like Koyaanisqatsi and Baraka and that kind of film, where you feel like you've not just been told a story, but that you've experienced something, that you've gone somewhere, that you've gone to a kind of another world in a way and experienced something. That world happens to exist right here in the West Coast of the US in 2020. But it was our endeavor to make Lead Me Home almost kind of like a science fiction film that's happening right here, right now. And through sound, through visuals, the film actually has a lot of space where the audience can just think about what and feel what they've just experienced. And it's about a difficult subject, but oddly enough, many people have kind of responded feeling something like inspiration from the film, because it feels like, oh, there's this untapped human resource that we're writing off. 500,000-600,000 Americans every day sleep on the streets, and we're kind of ignoring them. In many ways, part of the media is kind of blaming them. Some of our politicians are blaming the victims. And yet here they are, people with hopes and dreams, just like you and me. And so we wanted to kind of put all that into a film. It sounds kind of sort of arty, I guess, or over the top
Vicious.
maybe, but that's really what we were thinking about every day, was to try to translate this experience to an experience for the audience.
Well, the visual aspect, I think, is so important, and I think both of you play a role here in that kind of that visual shape that the film has, because there are these, of course, it's a very harrowing, kind of in your face look at the lives that these homeless have to go through. But then there's also, it's contrasted with these beautiful kind of drone shots and these almost like, again, these juxtaposing images of the people on the streets versus the people in their apartments with their Apple computers and their electricity and stuff. So walk me through, kind of putting that kind of shape to the film.
Well, early on, like Pedro was saying, we had this idea that partly came from our friend Dan Duane, and I think is apparent to anybody who really spends time in these tent encampments, which is that, people make homes wherever they are. This idea of homeless is kind of, in a way, a misnomer, because these are homes. Tents become bedrooms, a park bench becomes a living room, a faucet on the side of the building becomes a kitchen.
There's that great shot of outside a tent with a picture that says "Home is where the heart is."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. That and it's a cliche, but it's true. It really, we walked into a tent in Skid Row in LA. This isn't in the film, but we sat down in this tent with this young woman, and she had a little makeup counter and a wardrobe and lighting, and you're in there.
Very well decorated.
You can hear the street going by, but you feel like you're in somebody's home with all the creativity that one would put into one's home. And we had that feeling time and time again. And I think if you had asked me years ago, would you ever, go into a tent of a homeless person experiencing homelessness, I would say, ooh, that sounds kind of frightening. I think most people would consider that frightening, but it actually ended up being something that we looked forward to, almost like going to a friend's home. And so the idea of juxtaposing that to, what we tried to do is, from the perspective of the street, shoot our apartments, our homes, towers that are being built in these cities. And then through the magic of editing, which Pedro had a huge amount to do with, make those parallels for people and get people thinking about, like, oh, right, okay, there by the grace of God go I, kind of thing, right? I'm in my comfortable home, in my comfortable living room with my Apple computer, but if I lost my job, if my rent went up, could that happen to me? Yeah, maybe. It's not that far fetched. So I'm glad that came across for you.
When you're doing something like this, and you're seeing these people in these kind of harrowing situations, as a filmmaker, how do you emotionally distance yourself, or do you emotionally distance yourself? I've gotten different answers to that question from different filmmakers.
Well, here's the thing. I think we're, for me personally, and I can only speak for myself, it's harder to distance myself emotionally, especially when I think, and that's one of the things that was really such a transformative process, and really hit, not to use the word so much, but really hit home I think for us, is we would go out and we would film with Ruiz, who you see in the beginning of the film, and it's basically our main character, if we had one who kind of carries us through, and he's the one that we see at the very end with the, in his car, with his dog Luna. We would go out and we'd film with him, we'd have a great time, we'd share meals, we exchange stories, we would, and then we would, John and I would go to our comfortable homes, or comfortable houses, apartments, sleeps in our beds with electricity and all that, and knowing that Ruiz was there in a tent, in the streets or in his car, and it really kind of made us, really think, and question why, and why are we, so it was for me at least, it was kind of hard to distance myself emotionally. You know, you are invested, you are invested with these people's stories and lives, because you connect with them, you connect, and you see, you know, your own experiences, your own life's journey through, and say, you know, what if, you know, something had happened to me, you know, like, I don't, you know, there's not much separating, I think, all of us. I don't know. What do you think, John? Did you, I mean, for me, it was difficult. How about you?
Yeah, you know, it's this is you raised something, Tony, that's actually kind of become a pretty significant factor in making documentaries that I think we didn't pay attention to, at least when I first started out, you know, 25, 30 years ago, which is kind of, you know, the effect of pain and suffering have of these stories have, you know, on the filmmaking team. And I think more and more, thankfully, filmmakers and companies are starting to think about that and kind of, you know, caretaking of one another when we're going through these things. Of course, our trauma and pain of hearing these stories and telling these stories is nothing compared to you know, the people who are experiencing homelessness, and so that helps to kind of maintain that perspective. But yeah, you know, it's tough to kind of see the dark side of the system that we have in this country, you know, and it's complicated. We know it's not simple. We studied this issue, and we know that there's factors that range all the way from kind of systemic racism to economic policy to housing policy to you know, to
mental health and drug policy.
Yep, all that stuff. And some of it goes back 40, 50 years, you know, in terms of what the federal government and the state government have been doing. So it's complex, and you know, for me, what I do personally is I get a lot of strength out of feeling like we're turning that pain into something positive. We're not under any illusions that any single film is going to change the world, but, you know, hopefully a reminder, a little bit of a course correction for people who watch the film about you know, kind of the state of where we are in the United States with these policies. So that's where I kind of take some solace.
Does, you know, because this film has been shortlisted for the Oscar, does that, you know, kind of, you know, do those kind of accolades, does that in any way make your feelings about the accolades when you're talking about such a serious issue that affects so many people, how does that impact it? Does it make it better? Does it make it bittersweet because of how you're doing it? I mean, how does that impact you?
I mean, I've always subscribed to the theory that you know, everything that positive that happens to film, in this case, you know, number one, sold to Netflix. Oh my God, millions of people all around the world are going to see this, and that's just incredible. Premiered at Telluride, you know, played at IDFA, AFI, just had all these amazing, you know, accolades and chances, you know, that not all independent films get. And so we felt very fortunate about all that. And I subscribe to the theory that what's good for the film is good for the issue. And hopefully, you know, we try to always make outreach materials available on our website. We were talking earlier about school curriculum. We're big believers of getting these films into the schools and, you know, using them, you know, to educate on whatever issues arise from them. So yeah, I love the kind of marriage, so to speak, between kind of social action and art. Pedro and I consider ourselves filmmakers and storytellers, of course, first and foremost, but we're also working in the area of important social issues, and we love collaborating with teams that can kind of bridge those worlds for us.
Exactly, and I think, you know, what the greater goal is just to connect with more people, and, you know, get people from all walks of life to watch and to experience, you know, the film and the issue, maybe hopefully coming out of it with a new perspective. And I think that's the greatest reward is is connecting with other people, I think, and and getting their take on it. So so if it does, and we're lucky that the film is on Netflix, and I have family in Brazil that has been writing to me and talking about how much how moved they were by the film and by the stories. And in Brazil, we also have very similar, but in a very similar issues, but also in a very different way, but it is, I think we see audiences around the world connecting because we're all in a way dealing with variations on the same theme. So, and I think it's important to see how it is here.
Well, gentlemen, it is just such a harrowing and yet I think ultimately just beautiful look at a very difficult topic. And congratulations on all the success that you've had with it. And everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the Oscars, and stay tuned for interviews with more contenders throughout the season. John Shenk, Pedro Cos, the film is Lead Me Home. It is available on Netflix. Thank you, gentlemen, so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
It's been a pleasure.